Thanks for joining us for our final Farminar of the Winter Farminar 2012 series. As my good friend Nathan Anderson mentioned earlier, it is not winter at all in many parts of Iowa, and we are very confused as everyone else is, but we will keep the name the same. It's our final of the Winter Farminar series, and we're very glad to have you all with us. We are all here today because of this big statistic that is a very big deal. We're seeing a great opportunity right now for beginning farmers due to a changeover in the who's managing farms as the older generation is set to retire here in the next decade. So very interesting opportunity there, and we want to be part of the success of the next generation of farmers. We think we can do a lot to help at Practical Farmers of Iowa, and we sure want to encourage you to, wherever you are in your stages of being a farmer, we want to help you along your way. One of those ways we help is through these great online meetings we get to do. Oops, Ron, I wonder if you could, somebody's hitting the arrow for me a little too fast.
That's me. I'm sorry.
That's all right. No worries. Just wanted to mention that this is our final one of the Winter Farminar series, and we've had a great run of 16 new Farminars this year, and they're still available for viewing on recording on our website. So I definitely want to call those to your attention, and we will we're going to refresh the site this early spring and get those out there more easily accessible and easy to find to make sure you can continue to learn from these recorded Farminars. But I just wanted to thank our funder. The USDA grant we received through the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program is a federal funding pot of money that we're able to access and then pay farmers for their knowledge to share with others, as well as pay for the technology license and whatnot of this webinar technology, and want to make sure that we recognize their support. And please do, as the folks are already putting their email in the chat box, please do that, and also look at the viewer count in the upper right corner. We want to make sure we get an accurate tally so we can report to our funder who's watching these and where they're from and what they're learning from this. We'll follow up with you with a online survey link after this by that email address, so we can figure out how we're doing on using these Farminars well. As I've said, we've done these now, about over 50 Farminars we've done, and we definitely have a long-term interest in your success and care a lot about planning issues, care a lot about production, marketing, stewardship, and all the things in between. And we are here to stay. 27 years old organization now, and we will be here for another 27 and more. Want to call attention to folks in Iowa. We have a great opportunity to apply for the Savings Incentive Program. I see Drew Leitz on here as a participant. He's a Savings Incentive Program enrollee for class of 2013. And Nathan Anderson is actually one in the class of 2012 who will receive a dollar-for-dollar savings match at the end of the 2-year commitment. Up to $2,400 cash will match their savings, and we'll just require 4 networking events online, on farm, at conferences each year for those 2 years, and we'll match you with a mentor to pair you with someone who can help you expand your business in business plan in other ways. We'll have you complete that business plan over those 2 years, and each year you'll be part of a select group of folks. 25 each year is enrolled for the 2-year commitment. And we will accept 25 new folks this October. So please apply August through October. And if you're interested, there's a link on your screen. You can follow that for a little more information. And hopefully Nathan can mention a little bit about SIP and how that's working for him so far. Our game plan tonight is to have brief introductions. We'll have Nathan begin and then Ron. And then we'll have a discussion based on 10 big learning outcomes that Nathan had presented to Ron ahead of time. And we all want you to be part of that discussion as well. So please use the chat box to ask further questions, ask for clarification, and definitely we want you to be a participant and be actively engaged. We will conclude right at 8:30, so folks can plan the rest of their nights and whatnot. But please do enjoy the next 90 minutes. A couple more things I wanted to mention: that we are an organization that is here to help beginning farmers and experienced farmers. We're open, we're supportive, we're all different kinds of operations. We're very diverse in that respect, and we all believe in a triple bottom line for the future of agriculture and today and into the future. We think we can help you succeed by the value of our network. We think our network can help you make purchase decisions to save you thousands of dollars. Our network can help you, if you want to try a different practice on your farm, you can talk to farmers that have already done it successfully for years. And that membership fee is just $35 for individuals, $45 for the whole farm, with a whole host of benefits, including the ability to apply for the Savings Incentive Program and other opportunities, including discounts to our annual conference and more. Just click on that practicalfarmers.org/join link to join today. We are a great group of folks. We're committed, thinking about new things all the time, sharing our ideas together. We're very well noted in the media. Folks are always asked to ask our members to speak on certain topics. Here we are strategizing at our annual conference. There's Ron, our speaker for the evening. We really are passionate about our organization. Folks are really committed to seeing this organization thrive, and that's what makes our organization so powerful, is the members and our beginning farmers and experienced farmers. We have great legacy, great amount of skills and knowledge in our network, membership network, and we always are into new ideas and always into challenging new ideas. No more talking from me. Let's hear from Ron and Nathan. Thank you all for being here again, and I'll just pull up your slides, Nathan, and you can begin your introduction.
Sounds great. Thanks, Luke. Can everybody hear me okay? I'll just look at the chat box, and so if people could let me know, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking and hope everybody's listening. I want to thank PFI for the opportunity to ask some questions of a great farmer in Ron Rosmann, and get some great information, and hopefully we can all learn from this event tonight about long-term fertility management and the different ways to accomplish that. So great to see that you can hear me. Start off with my first slide there. We have my wife Sarah, who's in the chat box as well. We were married last August, so it's a beginning farm and a beginning relationship as well. So we're very excited to be a part of the PFI network, and very thankful as young farmers to have the opportunity to be back on the farm. We recognize that that's a real special opportunity that not a lot of young people these days have the chance to do. So we appreciate that very much, and we're thankful for that. On the left side there, we have a photograph of one of our favorite cows in our cow herd. So as we go through these slides, the professional pictures, the ones that look really good are the ones that are taken by my wife, Sarah. The ones that just look okay, those were the ones that I took. So hopefully you can enjoy those as we go through those as well. Our farm is located in Cherokee, Iowa. That's about in the center of the northwest part of the state. We have a row crop corn and soybeans operation. We do have a little bit of small grains and some hay that we use in our cow-calf operation, and we've fed out our own calves in the past. As that little bullet states, I started farming some on my own in 2005 and have farmed full-time since 2010, which is when I graduated from Iowa State from the agronomy program there. So since then, we've been back on the farm. We try to focus on efficient genetics in our cattle herd. If you can see that picture there, that's one of our heifers that's getting her consumption sitting down. So she's not burning a lot of calories, but still taking some in. So hopefully try to lighten the mood a little bit here with that picture. The goals of our farm that I have listed here are summarized from our business plan, which Luke mentioned a little bit about in the Savings Incentive Program. As Sarah and I are working through that, we're learning quite a bit as we go through, and we appreciate the opportunity to do that as well. It really helps us to put some ideas that we have in our head down on paper so we can refer back to them later and get a better picture of where we want our farm to be in the future. And as part of that, we have some goals for our farm. These are taken out of our mission statement and out of our vision for the future as well. But I picked these because I think they will lead into our discussion for tonight. The first one is to grow. We want our farm to grow and develop, and we want to do that in a manner that's financially responsible as well. We want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves financially and meeting our financial commitments. We want to increase our farm's environmental quality. Part of the increasing our farm's environmental quality part of it is just we're a young farmer. We're young farmers, and we have a different perspective about what farming might look like 50 years into the future, because we hope to be farming 50 years in the future. And that statistic that Luke put up at the very beginning is it's a very true story from Iowa and from many parts of agriculture, that there's a different perspective when you're going to be retiring in a few years. So we want to increase our farm's environmental quality through a number of different ways, but that's one of the topics. We want to diversify our operation. We realize that's one of the keys to meeting both of those first two goals that we mentioned. The last one that we're really interested in is we want to direct market more of our farm's production. As more and more people want to know where their food comes from, we realize the value of that, and we also realize the value of putting food on people's table and doing that in a way that's tangible and in a way that's responsible as well. So, Drew, I see you had a question. Do I think growing financially requires expanding existing operations or new lines of business or enterprises? I don't think it requires that necessarily, but you can. Okay, I'm trying to get your question here. So one or the other. I think you can do it both ways. You know, I think what we're looking at now is expanding our cropping operation and expanding our livestock operation, but we're also looking at the potential to add new businesses or new enterprises to our farm as well, to grow financially too. So we're more cautious as we look at adding those enterprises, just from a financial management standpoint. The upfront cost of adding certain enterprises might be more than others, and that's analysis that we try to do responsibly again, but we try to take that into account. But I think both ways are ways that we're looking to grow our farm, and both ways are difficult now, especially in the climate today. So in the farming climate today. So hopefully, Drew, that answered your question. But yep, we're in the same area of the state too, so I understand exactly where you're at, Drew. And with that on the goals, the question that we pull from that is what role does adding livestock and longer term crop rotations have in meeting some of those goals? Because I think it definitely can, but we just want to see what we can do. So with that, I'll let Ron introduce himself.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Sounds great.
Okay. That's my wife, Maria. She grew up in Sioux City, but she's become a farmer, and a very good one. And we've been married 34 years. Yeah, this year, 34 years. Let's see if I got that right. No, yeah, 34 years. And let's see, that's our family there. We have 3 sons. Our oldest, David, there kneeling on the left holding the cat. He lives in Minneapolis, and right now he's working for an organic farmer up there, Joe Fitzgerald, who I know some of you know on the call here. Next is Daniel, who's farming, and Ellen Walsh Rosmann is on the webinar tonight, and that's Daniel's wife and partner. And it's great to have him farming with us. And then standing next to Maria is Mark. He's our youngest son, and he's back home right now. He just got out of the Peace Corps in Honduras for 2 years, working down there in ag and lots of other issues. Maria got her degree in journalism from Creighton University, and I got mine in biology from Iowa State back in 1973. David's was public service and administration in ag. Daniel's was agronomy, and Mark's was agronomy and history. Well, that's our dog, Casey. We can't leave her out. She's been with us since 2000, and she's just a member of the family. Oh, that's a picture of our farm. Mark did that barn quilt there. had the pleasure of and the opportunity to help start the Practical Farmers of Iowa back in 1986. I was on the first board as vice president. It's been a phenomenal organization to work with, and working with other farmers and staff has just been really a good thing. Had lots of other neat opportunities in the world of organic. One thought I had already, Nathan, is that, you guys are getting your start in your 20s on sustainable ag. I didn't really get my start on sustainable agriculture issues until 1983, because the first 10 years we farmed conventionally, more in some ways, but I'll get into that later. Okay, so Nathan, I guess, well, I'll talk about our farm and what we all do and et cetera during the webinar, so I won't get into that, I guess. So Nate, you're going to start then?
Yep. Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off with the first question. The first one, as we look at the topic, that's just kind of a general why question. Why use manures versus other fertilizer sources? Why longer rotations? I know there's a lot of answers out there, and there's a lot of people that have strong feelings on both sides, but just to you personally and your farm, why do you use manures, and why do you have longer crop rotations?
Sure. Well, you're getting to the real basics, I think, of what makes for, I would say, a profitable farm and an environmentally, all those goals that you have. I think, as far as I'm concerned, the best model for any farm, just about anywhere in the world, probably, is diverse crops and then having livestock in the system. And it's a very sad thing that we've gotten away from that here in the Midwest, and just beyond words. And why is that so important? Well, having livestock in the system and having diverse crops. Well, for the livestock, you got forages of all kinds, you got legumes, and you can utilize those more easily and keep them on the farm versus selling your hay off the farm if you don't have livestock. So it allows you to recycle all your nutrients on the farm. I think it's very important that we feed our soil microorganisms. And I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that if we feed them consistently with some of the same things, that we develop communities of microorganisms just like we develop different crops and communities of plants and so forth. Since we use our own manure, we lower the costs instead of buying it. If you're going to have to buy poultry manure or other manure, it's going to cost more. And then the high cost of purchasing your other nutrients like P and K. We haven't applied any K in 30 years. One reason is we are naturally high in potassium here in western Iowa. That's where we're located. I never did say that. Western Iowa, about 50 miles northeast of Omaha. We're actually only like 35 miles east of the Missouri River, but we are not in the Luss Hills. We're directly east of the Luss Hills by about 15 miles. We do purchase some rock phosphate based on soil tests, but we haven't done it for about 4 or 5 years. But we are looking at buying a load this year. And of course, we do add some trace elements from time to time when the soil test calls for it. I guess that's about all. Well, here's why we use longer rotations. And Nate, you stop me anytime you want to, okay?
Will do. I'm just listening and taking notes here, Ron.
Okay. we haven't always had the same crop rotation, but for many years we did a 6-year where we had corn, beans, corn, small grains, and then 2 years of hay. But I learned through experience, that it was harder to get good small grain crops following corn for various reasons, but the two biggest ones are sometimes too much trash, so you don't get a good seed bed, and you don't get good soil to seed contact, and then also you don't have as much fertility following corn since it's such a heavy N user, and so if you follow soybeans you're going to get some nitrogen there. So we have changed to that rotation. And you'll see point number 3 there is something that I just figured this out after you were asking the questions, Nate, that it allows us to have the high value cash crops on at least 50% of our farm acres 4 years out of 7. You got corn, beans, corn, beans. And then it allows the soil building crops in place for 3 years out of 7. Here is a breakdown of our total acres. And not everyone can see the PowerPoint, or am I wrong?
Everybody, I think everybody should be able to see that, Ron. I can see it just fine.
Okay.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
PowerPoint.
Oh, here's a question. How often do we soil test? The answer to that is generally every 3 to 4 years, or we hit them all, but I guess the goal usually is to do a third 1 year and a third the next year and a third the year after that. So it's not quite so expensive all in 1 year. But there you can see our different crops and the amount of acres in each one. And that's pretty much the same every year. I'm just gonna, well, we have a lot of headlands for lots of reasons. One is, you got to have them for your organic neighbors that are conventional, but also since we are ridge tillers, I'm not going to bounce over ridges and have end rows. So we have headlands where many of our headlands we can bale for hay because we are so fortunate in having most of the 700 acres all contiguous. Daniel Farm's right next to us on the north side, so we're really lucky. We have around 640 acres contiguous. Here you can see the acres by crop, and I see Luke must have put up this nice circular graph because I couldn't do it.
I got your back, Ron. That's me.
You bet. But I think that's a pretty good mix there. But of course it's going to depend on your soil type and your slopes and what your goals are. Here's another question. Competing with do you see, this is Drew's question about adding small farm livestock, specifically pigs. I think pigs are great for lots of reasons. For one thing, when I say we grow for Organic Prairie, which is a division of Organic Valley, besides having our own meat label with beef and pork. We have our own meat sales for 14 years, but we've been growing for Organic Prairie on the beef since '98 and the pork since 2003, and we really need more organic pork. We really do. So that's something to consider there. And in a longer rotation, here you can see we get if you have a long rotation, you get the end benefits for a longer period of time versus that 3-year rotation where you really are going to only get in for about 4 months, because you're planting it. Well, it's not just going to get tall, let's say in, July, August, August, September, October, let's say, July, August, September, October. Of the year, you got it in small grains. And then the next year, if you're going to plow it or turn it over and plant corn, you're only really going to get about 1 month of growth or 2 at the most before you're, getting rid of it. So there again, legumes in the longer rotation are going to provide more N, that's for sure. We've actually had, a couple of years ago, we've had some fields that have yielded right at 200 bushels an acre on corn, where in that 7-year rotation it was following this last year of hay, and then no manure, 0 manure, just following the legume. But I think that's partly also because we have a lot of mineralizable N in our soil organic matter, and I think doing this for 29 years, we quit using herbicides in 1983. Here's another question. Will you speak on grazing as part of the rotation? That's a good one. We did rotate pastures, not just rotational grazing, but we used to rotate pastures around every 4 to 5 years for about the first 15 years. But then as we started rotationally grazing, and as we started adding, we're up to around 90 cows now, and we have 2 herds, a fall herd and a spring herd. And as we've started adding lots of sets of pastures, not just, one big pasture, it takes so much fencing. And I like to use high tensile, certainly around the outsides. And then in the partition fences, I always used the cable that you pulled hand tight from Premier Fencing. I never moved fence like a lot of your pure grazers do. The reason for that is because we are so diverse. We just don't have time, and we get lazy, and we don't have enough people to do everything maybe that in a purist fashion. So our goal is to always make sure we do a lot of things right, but not everything right. But anyway, so I got away from the rotating pastures, and now we've got some pastures that have been in for around 15 years now. But I think we've got 5 different sets of pasture. So most of them are always in that 20 to 25 acre range, which fits our numbers of livestock, with about 4 or 5 paddocks in each one.
I just wanted to jump in and say that we definitely have grazing programming as well, and we will continue to add those topics to our Farminar series for next year. But I want to make sure we try to focus this one on on Nathan's questions as well for fertility and crop rotations.
You bet. Nathan and everyone, this is a question I get a lot. Can you make this work without livestock? Can you make sustainable and/or organic operation work? Well, here's Rodale's. I would say with what's the right word? With some reservation, yes. But Rodale's 30-year farming systems comparison, for instance, I looked that up to see, I knew they were doing cash grain systems without livestock, and you can see that it has compared very favorable as compared to a conventional cash grain operation. and you can see the organic legume only system without manure yielded better in dry years. But I think the third point is probably the most important point here, is that livestock in the system provide more flexibility in cropping sequences and field management, and then we'd also have to include such things as cash flow, especially with hogs or sheep or goats, or something that has a fairly quick turnover, or dairies, of course. If I was a younger man, I always said if I had gotten into organics in my 20s, I would have become a dairy farmer. There's no question about it. I would have done it, but it's a little late now. But Ellen and Daniel are getting into dairy goat farming, so I guess they'll be the generation to do that, not me. Okay, Nate, what do you think here?
This is the point where my wife and I are struggling. You look at the cost of livestock right now, and in our area, if you have $2,200, you might be able to buy one bred heifer, and not much more than that. So when it comes to increasing the number of livestock, you're trying to get the manure from that to use in your farm and your rotation, but you're looking at lengthening the rotation so you can better utilize some of the feeds that you have. Where do you start? Livestock first, longer rotation first. Part of it is all cash flow dependent, of course, but what are your thoughts on that for our farm and for our operation?
Sure. Well, again, Luke made this very, very nice here. Thank you, Luke. That's a very tough question. I guess in thinking about it, I thought, it depends on a lot of things. Can you sell your hay profitably? If you want to add more hay and not add pasture at first. I think the answer is yes. Hay prices here in the Midwest, here in Iowa, have been extremely high. And if you want to do, if you have some labor and you want to do small square bales of hay, I know the Denison Livestock Auction up here just north of us, 25 miles, square bales we're bringing, at one point we're bringing $7 a bale. So, if you want to do good quality square bale hay or good quality round bale dairy quality hay, yeah, you can do it without having livestock. At least at this point. That wasn't always true, but as organics has caught on with more food consumption in this country, which has just been very dramatic, that growth has. Feed has been in short supply, actually.
And then too, I think we run into the concern. Well, if you're selling the hay, you're exporting a lot of nutrients off in that hay, and that's obviously a concern too. And it's a consideration, but you have to start somewhere too. So.
Well, that's a very good point. So I did this little graph here with from 2012 to 2016, and I hope I'm not being too optimistic.
Actually, your first 2 years look real close to the situation we're in right now. So.
I tried to be fairly conservative at first, anyway, to where you're not getting everything bred, and you're not getting all the heifers bred. You're not getting all the cows bred back. But then you can realistically by 2016 have 20 cows and 10 and possibly 10 heifers. If things go reasonably well for you and you have, good fertility with however you're, both in your mother cows and in your bulls, or if you're using artificial insemination. We use all bulls, and we're using all our own bulls. That's a whole nother story now. We're in our 4th year of developing what I hopefully someday will be our own line bred breed of red Angus cows.
Yeah, this chart
So
is great, Ron. I think for the portion of our pasture that we're focusing on grazing now, the carrying capacity is about 35 or so cow-calf pairs. So your little chart here started right about where we are and right about where we ended up. I'm not sure if you knew all of that going in, but that's
no,
a very helpful chart too. So
it's actually sort of how we operate. You know, we had to start somewhere too. I started out with about 1973. I started out buying my two brothers out. I got 1/3 of the cows, and then I bought them out on the other 2/3 because they weren't farming. And so I ended up with about 12 cows. And we have, we're up to around 90 now. I've always had a goal of getting to 100, but can't seem to get there. And maybe it's a good thing because we actually have too many cows for our pasture. We are just the other way around.
I'll jump in on Drew's question here quick too on how you figure carrying capacity, how many cows per unit of area. There's a lot of variations that can come into that. The number that we use when we're rotationally grazing, we move about once every 5 days to a week or so, and we figure about an acre, right about an acre per cow-calf pair. So that's about what it is. If it's good pasture, we're dealing with some cedar trees and some other issues too. So our hope is that as we grow our herd, we can take care of some of those issues and improve the pasture in those areas and get up to that higher carrying capacity. So that's what we use, Drew. I know I've heard in this area too, if you're in more of a forested area, that you're grazing undergrowth, which I don't always recommend, but if that's the situation you're in, they often figure about 10 acres per cow-calf pair. So, somewhere in that range. I know that's not a helpful question or helpful answer, but hopefully there's a little guidance there. But back to you, Ron. You went through the crops you have in your rotation, so which ones do you use and why? And on the livestock too, which livestock do you use and why? I know you said you like the hogs too, so
Sure.
what helps your decisions on that?
All right. I am going to go back and respond to Drew's question a little bit too. When we first started, we're out here in the tall grass prairie, very few trees. If you want trees, you got to plant them yourself. So, and most of the people out here would say you're nuts to have cows because our land is, $8,000-9,000 an acre, that type of stuff. And but we started out, we were at first maybe 1 to 1.5 cow-calf pairs per acre, but we certainly come down from that to where we are at that about 1 cow-calf pair per acre as well. And as you can see by my acres of pasture, that's about what it is. But we also have grass-fed yearlings out in pasture. Yeah, I'd say, Nate, you're in the ballpark there. And our paddocks are, like I say, about 4 to 5 acres in each paddock, and we're moving every 3, 4, 5 days. So that if you got 5 paddocks and you're moving every 4 to 5 days, it's 20 to 25 days. And I'll be the first to admit we have pushed the envelope too far on that, and we are going to take the advice of the grazer from Vermont that spoke at our PFI annual meeting, where he talked about, if you're grazing livestock, you want carbohydrates. You don't necessarily want protein if you're raising grass-fed cattle, for instance. So we're going to try to start grazing much later this year, like at 14 inches, and then only take it down to about 6 inches at the very most, and then not get it so low late in the fall, too. So we've been very guilty of pushing it too far. So anyway, on to these crops. corn, a lot of, and most all of these things now, you have to understand we have learned through years of experience. Experience is such a good teacher, and and it can be a very harsh teacher, but I think all in all, if you're willing to think about it and learn from it, you're going to gain from it.
That's why
So anyway,
that's why I'm just letting you answer the questions, Ron. I'll just keep asking.
Okay, yeah, well, but you got to realize we're still learning every day too. You never quit learning. That's the beauty of organic farming or sustainable farming, is it's always challenges your brain. So anyway, tall hybrids, leafy for weed control. In our area, 104 to 112 day maturity. Don't, depending on where you're at. I know you guys with your short seasons, you got to plant short season corn, but here in Iowa, most of us are I see some producers planting that 100-day or less corn, and you got to sacrifice yield. There's just no getting around it. Everybody used to plant 112, 114-day corn through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and it just changed here the last 20 years with big ag. So anyway, we're ridge tillers. It's a very big key for us for weed control. We have the research trials from many years in PFI to show that ridge till in an organic system means 5 to 7 times less weeds than when you disc or conventional till. And, because of lots of reasons, but one being close to a no-till situation helps a lot. On these planting populations, we've learned I used to plant 20,000 or less in the 70s. In the 1980s, it kind of jumped up to 22. As time went on in the 90s, and we started we did a trial 2 different years in corn where we compared different planting populations, and every time the high population beat out the lower, or the medium population. So we've gone 30,000 or more, and there's other good reasons for that, because changing weather. When you're in an organic system, and you don't have treated seed, and you have cold springs, and you're rotary hoeing, you want to take some corn out. You want to plant thick to start with, so you end up with an adequate, or so you have a better chance of ending up with an adequate planting population. Soybeans, some of the same things are the same. Medium bush or bush type varieties for weed control, which there aren't, like Blue River Organic Seed Company, and some of the ISU numbers are more medium bush. Blue River actually has a true bush type variety out this year. I would like to see many more of them, not these straight thin line beans that are meant for narrow rows. We've been getting really good yields with bush type or semi-bush type beans. And don't plant these early maturing varieties if you don't have to, if you got a long enough growing season, because you're going to get less yield again. Where we're at, we grow like 2.3 on up to 3.4. And that is, again, don't listen to some of these people that say you can't grow 3.0 beans or later, because, again, I remember farming in the 70s and 80s. In the 70s when I first started, we were all planting later beans. Okay, food versus feed. We started out by growing food grade beans because there was a premium, $2 to $3 more, and there still is that premium, but we've gotten away from it because they're just harder to grow to meet the specs on color as much as anything. because we've gone through in the 90s. I don't know what's going on now because we're not in it, but soybeans that would get discolored from insects biting into them, bean leaf beetles, etc., causing staining on the beans. And Japanese or any of your tofu markets don't like that. So anyway, sometimes your beans might end up getting rejected, and you generally you get higher yields with feed grade varieties. Although I will say the ISU food grade varieties that are being developed today in the last few years are right up there with high yields, because I have had one variety and it yielded in the 60 bushel range. But on planting population, again, plant fairly heavy because of unknowns and rotary hoeing. So I guess that does that one. I just got some pictures here to show our system. We use the Buffalo brand name for our planter and our 4 cultivators. We have 4 4-row cultivators. We're still in 38-inch rows too, which is very old-fashioned. We haven't changed because our yields have been good in 38-inch rows, and when you're on the ridge and have a lot of trash, it gives you room to throw your trash. I know a lot of guys that were 30-inch ridge tillers went back to wider rows, like 36 at least. Here shows last cultivation. We generally cultivate 3 times on soybeans if the weather allows, and 2 times on corn. Oh, what do we do for feeding? Here's where some of our feeding strategies. We try to sell as much of our own organic corn and soy as is possible, and then buy back organic screenings, clean out poor germinating seed from companies, from organic companies, to feed to our livestock so that we can, it's just a strategy. The oats are used primarily for cattle and hog feed. We have sold some on the organic market in years past, but not anymore. Succotash, that's wheat, barley, and oats. And then triticale is a cross between wheat and rye. And then we'll add field peas to add protein. And then we feed barley, all of that to hogs to lower our protein needs, because you can see organic soybean meal is costing $1,000 or more a ton today. So, okay. Just some pictures there of our farm. You can see our slopes. We have some 11 to 13% slopes. A couple E and Fs they would be classified as, but most of them are C and D slopes. Of course, we're baling a lot of straw. That's another reason why we need a lot of straw, both square bales and round bales, for our livestock and for our compost, for our carbon source. That was taken when the boys were little. Field of rye, just showing how tall it gets. Are you okay if I just keep going?
You bet, Ron. Just keep going through, and we'll get to my next question here shortly.
Okay. We use a lot of annual forages too, to help our pastures, stretch our pastures out. One of my favorites is Alta Sweet Mammoth Red. where we will plant that with our oats, let's say, or barley. Alta Swede gets fairly tall. I'll show you. Oh no, I'll show you. Well, where's it at? Oh, there it is. That's Alta Swede red clover in early September. It's a type of mammoth red clover, but most mammoth red clover stays short. But Alta Swede gets tall enough that you can get a nice hay crop off of it or graze it. We love turnips. Hairy vetch we use a lot. We flew on hairy vetch in our standing soybeans on 70 acres this last year. But we didn't get any rain last fall, so I don't know what the stand is going to be like. Rye is good in wet years. In dry years, be very careful if you got it as a cover crop on soybeans, going to corn, or on anything. I've had too many bad experiences with rye in dry years, and in wet years you can't take it out either with the ridge till planting system. But if you are disking it or plowing it under, then rye can be very good. Sorghum Sudan, we use that some years in our grass finishing. Buckwheat, don't recommend it as a annual forage unless, well, the cattle will graze it, which is contrary to what I was told. But if you dare let it go to seed, it becomes a weed. Rape, which I just found out this year is just another name for canola. Rape used to be in hog pastures when I was growing up all over our area. We have some. We're going to plant some rape again this year. Yeah, Drew's got a question. How do you find adequate labor to square bale? Well, it's tough. We generally on our farm wait until third cutting or even fourth cutting because that's the only time we have time. Meaning, if we don't hire any labor, we'll just, bale we'll bale about 400 bales at a time and then go unload them and then bale another 400, and it takes you 2-3 days, but we usually end up with a couple thousand square bales of hay. But straw, yeah, lots of times I'm able to hire a high school kid to help on that. Because we're baling 1,000 to 1,500 square bales of straw every year and about 100 big bales of straw. Here's some of these annual forages. On the left, that's Daniel with some yearlings on sorghum Sudan grass in August. And that right picture, there's cool season grasses in the background, and then warm season sorghum Sudan in the front. Here's your buckwheat. Great for preventing weeds, but we were going to try to combine some of this and save the seed. And that was the winter or the fall that it rained every day in the month of October. And it went to seed, some of it, and now I'm still dealing with it. This is 4 years ago. Here's some big turnips, purple tops. Cows love turnips. Here's just some tricks that we've learned from hard experience. One thing is, if you're going to sow red clover in any situation, let's say you're adding it to alfalfa, or you don't need to plant more than, if you're just planting red clover, 5 to 8 pounds is adequate, contrary to what the seed companies would tell you. When I add it to pasture, I have found that 1 pound is sometimes too much. It just seems like every seed grows. And on alfalfa, we always plant around 12 to 15 pounds in a hay setting, and then maybe that 1 pound of red clover and 2 to 3 pounds of orchard grass, and maybe a little brome, not much. Annual rye works nicely in bare spots if you just go out there and drill it in your hay field, if you got adequate moisture. For our pastures here, we use endophyte-free fescue in a couple sets. Then in other sets, we aim for, your orchard and brome. And perennial rye, I don't like it because it doesn't last that long. I like the clovers, the white clover, the creeping alfalfa, grazing alfalfa. Bird's foot trefoil really is nice out in our area. White clover seems to do well. And we planted some chicory already this spring, or it's not spring, but it's acting like it. We did it about 11 days ago. I planted chicory of like at 2 to 3 pounds an acre, and about a half a pound of creeping alfalfa and a half a pound of Kira white clover. Drilled it in, and it just worked perfectly. Hopefully it's going to come up, but we had a nice little rain, but the ground conditions were perfect. So, okay, that's it for now, Nate.
I think we're going to get on the livestock side of things. This kind of leads into the next question too. Sorry, I'm going through slides a little bit here to jump ahead to the question, but it's asking about facilities that you use for livestock, and I see we're going through some of them here, so I'll scroll back a little bit. But
yeah, whatever you want to ask.
When you've got you're trying to use manures, so you need to have the livestock in some type of facility that you can easily gather that manure to use it, in a cost-effective way. And then, your composting, the spreading logistics, all that stuff takes some time and takes some labor. I guess we can just kind of go through some of these slides, and if you want to share about...
Sure, I'll quickly. I've kind of already said it, why cattle and hogs, so I'll move on. I guess wait a minute. I go back to... Can't really see that one maybe real well, but on the right there is our solar farrowing house we built in 1980. It's got a solar collector on the whole south side, and it's worked really well. Saved a lot of LP. This is what we call a Cargill type grower unit, where we can where our pigs, after they're out of the nursery in the farrowing house, and they'll either go to this little building right north of what we call the old hog barn. They'll either go up there or they'll go right to the grower unit, and then we finish in that big white barn. And then the green roofed barn, there we generally have breeding stock, and then we will also, if we have to have cattle in for any reason, they'll be in there. On the left, that's our feeding yard for grain-fed cattle that are weaned in the in December. And then I'll move on. There you can see our numbers. I think I didn't mention all of that, but we're in our 4th year of grass-fed cattle, and I think grass-fed cattle is probably harder than going organic because of the need for quality genetics and quality forage, or the right kind of forage and the right kind of genetics, I guess would be a better answer. We generally have 50 sows in 2 groups, so we're farrowing about 4 to 5 times a year for sure because, well, I'll move on. This is a quarter-mile south of us where we have more facilities. That's our hoop building where we tub grind hay, and then we have machinery storage on the north part. The green shed, well, our barn got blown over by a tornado, so we built a new cattle shed. We use it for machinery and for feeding cattle inside square bales and for just allowing cattle to get out of the weather. We've got a bunk line over on the far right with 2 yards and access to pasture now for all our cattle. This group can go out, and we have a bunk line up here too, and access to pasture. That little shed there is for having grinding shell corn or adding grain. A trick we use, and it really works well, is we try to keep our cows and calves out in the field all winter. This is our fall herd. And so when I say fall, we're calving predominantly in August and first part of half of September. We don't get many calves in October. But we'll make these little piles on a field that's going to go to small grains. Well, this was when we were still back in that rotation of following small grains or following corn with small grains. But if you make these put them in a new place every day, and you get to where you know how much they got to clean up that pile and not manure crap on it, so they eat it. And so anyway, then we'll move to another area the next day. Never put the pile in the same place. So they spread the manure, not us. Well, there's a feedlot setting there at what we call the south. Well, what's in the pile? That's got ground corn stalks, good hay, and then stubble hay, meaning it's the hay from the cutting after a new stand of hay. So it's got 3 ingredients. Manure, I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. I'll keep going. This is what we think is an ideal steer. A lot of depth, a lot of thickness. That's the kind of animal we want, either for grain-fed or grass-fed. It really is nice to have good facilities for emergencies, which we've been fortunate. We're only pulling maybe 3 to 4 calves out of our 85 to 90 cows. But when you do have to pull a calf, you need to have a head gate, and you really need. I mean, I used to rope them until I was in my 30s. No more of that. And have swinging gates on each side. We have a little problem that one gate on the north doesn't swing wide enough because it's too close to the barn wall sometimes. Sometimes we have to move that cow over to the south. There, we also have the opening where if you have to milk a cow to get colostrum in the calf, or if you have a dumb calf, which once in a while it's going to happen, you can open that little gate up and not get killed with the cow kicking you. Or we always tie a rope anyway on the back leg and then tie it around that post to make sure we're safe. That's that farrowing house. Here's some pigs in the grower unit. This year, Nate, we're going to do a feeding trial with Practical Farmers of Iowa and Iowa State, where we're going to compare a typical corn ration. This will be organic, of course. A typical corn, soy premix ration compared to the alternative ration where we use percentages of oats, succotash, peas, ground alfalfa, and then the remainder corn and soy and premix. And we're going to do that, with identical numbers of hogs in a side-by-side trial. About 40 hogs. We're going to start within hopefully about 10 days with this trial. And we're really interested in feed efficiencies, costs, carcass quality, etc. I think it's going to be a really good trial for not only for our own benefit, but to see what organic producers' costs are in feeding hogs. Here's our box. We did have crates in this farrowing house until around 2002, but we always used straw, and we hand clean the crates every other day with a skid loader down the middle. It wasn't that hard. We had 18 crates. Now we made these wooden pens, and we use the old crate parts to make the dividers. Works quite well. So the pigs, have protection on all, at least as many sides as you can get. These pens are about 6 by 8. We put hovers and heat lamps over where that little piece of plywood is too there. Nate, if you got any questions, fire away too. So.
Nope, I'm just listening here still, Ron.
Okay. Well, here's some typical finishing hogs. We maintain 50% Berkshire in our herd for lots of reasons. I think we've raised nearly every breed of hog known to mankind. I have raised nearly every one. And Berks, not only do they have the highest quality meat, they are the most docile. The boars are great breeders. They're hardy. They're great for organic because they have a lot of chest capacity. We do try to keep 50% white in our mothers. So what we're doing is we have separate breeding herd with separate boars, so that we'll have Chester white. Try to get 50% Chester white in our mothers because of the mothering ability. And then we have Duroc and Burke in there. And, sometimes we'll have Burks that are 50% in the mothers too. And we're getting along pretty well. But they do tend to be a little lazier sometimes. You don't get quite as big of litters, but all in all, we're doing okay with them as mothers as well. But here's an example. This is our farrowing house, but we let our pigs and sows run outside, of course, as much as we can.
That was
okay.
We answered some of that question already, but we'll jump into the composting part of that.
Yeah.
That's a pile there on our farm.
Sure.
We bed our calves when we're feeding them as well, and that's our straw. We've got straw for our carbon source too, and it works great. It's nice to see that pile start to heat a little bit, and we can turn it too. And we've got our own old Cargill style unit there that's not used for hogs anymore, but it still has the runoff containment on the front of it, so that works great to
Sure.
use as a little trench for our compost too. So, what do you do on your compost system here too?
Okay, I'm going to go back. Something we do differently now. It doesn't show it in this picture. in our finishing barns and in our grower unit, we now put big bales outside in the yard as well as inside the barn, because we've found anything to get your manure less watery or sloppy during, the winter and when it's rainy. Plus, the hogs love to eat straw, and there's going to be legumes and hay in there some, There's going to be some feed in there, but they'll eat a good part of a bale. And they'll lay out there, and it just gives us more manure as well. I don't have very good pictures of our compost, but we did something that we're happy we did. In 1985, I bought a compost turner that is a 3-point model. It's called a Wildcat, and it cost brand new $7,000 in 1985. Today, this thing is $50,000 for one like that. So, if it allowed us to turn our manure as often as we wanted without going out there with the front end loader and constantly turning it. So, I feel like it's paid for itself many times, but I know you're not going to be able to afford one. We still, though, we will shape up our piles with a skid loader or front end loader so that we get them heaped up around 4 to 5 feet tall, 5 to 8 feet wide at the most, so you got adequate room for heating. That's very important. Versus here, you can see this was in the winter, and we probably didn't even turn this yet. This is from the spreader, mostly, just how we spread it. Go out there and just back up and spread it. And we'll go ahead and, turn this compost 2 to 3 times, 3 times, let's say, in the summer, and then apply as much as we can in the fall. But then we'll have all this accumulated from, winter on, and we've got enough livestock and enough bedding that we've been able to come up with 800 to 1,000 tons of finished compost annually. And that's a lot. And the amount of money we've saved is just phenomenal. If we had to purchase that Fertility, that's considering, now you got to remember, this is going to shrink by 50%. But we're estimating finished compost, we're ending up with, that much tonnage. And we're trying to get 3 to 5 to 7 ton even on all our corn acres, if we can, where it's going to corn, first-year corn. Second-year corn out of the rotation.
Yeah, just to put the weights in perspective, this compost pile that you see here, this is probably a 10 to 16 ton pile after it's done composting. So just to give a little better visual for the weights that we're talking about, it seems like a decent sized pile until you go to spread it. So
right, but our piles look a lot different after we've shaped them up nicely, and then we'll turn it, and some of it is you can do some things with the turner to make it have a little better shape too. Sometimes we don't have to reshape it. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Why do we compost, I guess, versus raw manure? Well, there's a lot of controversy on that subject, and I'm not saying that we're doing it right. I know, if you've heard of Dick Thompson, for instance, the guy that started PFI, he tried composting and he had a turner too, like ours, but he sold it and quit composting because he didn't feel he had got enough nutrients out of it, because you do lose N, P, and K through leaching and volatility. But what I like about it is you end up with a stable product that is about a 111 at the worst, or even, if you can get a 212 or better on pounds per ton. But then it allows us to put it on at any time of the year, except, obvious, we can put it on in the fall or early spring and not worry about losing any more of the nutrients. And I think we're feeding the microorganisms. So we have two big spreaders that hold, probably 4 to 6 ton each. But we've got them so that they fit in between our ridges, which means we had to make changes on one of them. So we're not running over our ridges. I would not take the plunge on buying a compost turner unless you thought you had the numbers of livestock to warrant it. I would invest in a used skid loader if you don't already have one. They are a lifesaver for your back. You could probably buy. We have 2 skid loaders now. We have the little one, which is like a 25 horsepower diesel that can fit in all the tight spots. And then we just bought a bigger one, a Gale 5240 that's got a 6-foot bucket on it, I think. And that will actually be able to load our feed into our feed wagon. And then we got front end loader on our front wheel assist tractor too. But it's taken us 39 years to get there. That's the thing. All these things we never had a front wheel assist tractor until the year 2005, I think. Now I have 3 of them, and I don't know how I could get along without them. But I'm getting to be, a little bit older, and I grew tired of driving down the road in the wintertime and freezing to death, for one thing, on an open tractor for all those years, for 25 years or 30 years or so almost. So it catches up with you. Okay, Nate.
Yeah, you talked about these a little bit, so I'm going to skip ahead to the next question here. You kind of hit on this in the first slides when you were talking about your rotations, but as a beginning farmer, I know Drew. I see him in this conversation. He's thinking along the same lines as I am. Cash return and your turnover is a big factor, especially for those that are lending you money. For our farmland purchase last fall, the FSA, Farm Service Agency through the USDA, through the government, is a big component of that, and that's a very helpful loan, but they want to see that money going to work and want to see that cash return on your farm. So those longer rotations, they can be profitable, and especially when you have the livestock, it's a great way to manage a farm system, but they can often spread out the time between those higher income crops. You really talked to this on the first one, but how does our farm work around that concern and that problem? And maybe Drew can type in an addition to that question too, and help with it a little bit.
Maybe it would be helpful if I knew how many acres each of you are farming and how much livestock you have now.
The acres is for us between what we're farming some with Dad too, and so that's around 800 acres with about there'll be 15 head of cattle this year.
Okay. How much of it is organic?
None yet.
Not, you're still in transition.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a challenge. We started our transition in 1983, and there were no organic premiums until from 83 until 94 when we became certified. So the first 11 years, we just keyed on reducing our input costs. That's one reason on the economic side why we quit using herbicides, is I figured I could do it cheaper, and I knew how to cultivate because I grew up, with all that stuff. Now, we had a leg up because we already had we never gave up on the rotations. We had small grains, we had a cow herd, we had farrow to finish hogs with my dad. So we never went just row crops and no livestock. So that gave us a leg up on soil quality to start with. I think, it sounds like, well, how many acres are you transitioning, Nate?
Nothing's being transitioned right now. That's
Okay,
a hope for the future. But
okay, so you're just trying to get livestock started.
we're trying to get into a point where we've got a good balance between where we're at in our cropping system and where we're at on our livestock side. And I think these principles, organic or conventional, are ones that you can apply to improve your soil quality on the farm, which as a beginning farmer, that's long-term value in your crop ground if you have high quality soil that's got real good organic matter and real good soil activity too. So that's something that regardless of the system you're in, that's a value to us. So we think we can get there too. Again, regardless of the conventional or the organic system that you're in, there's a lot of principles that you can still apply to improve your operation.
Of course. So. I'm looking at Drew's and managing a short 80 in college, and will begin farming about 350 due to high cash returns on the conventional crops.
Yeah, and I think Drew and I are kind of in the same situation on that one. Not to speak too much to his situation, but just as a beginning farmer, when you don't have direct control of a lot of the ground that you farm.
Yes, so. It might be realistic to keep taking advantage of the high conventional prices, knowing that they're not always going to stay high.
Mm-hmm.
There's already talk about what could happen this year with corn. Of course, so much of it's weather dependent, but I think the day is not too far off that we will see drops in conventional prices, and that might be the time you could actually start making the crop transition. I would keep continuing to build your livestock herd regardless,
and
so that maybe you can start adding, if you want to add some more hay, and cut down on your fertilizer costs on your conventional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely one thing that we're looking at too. We have the pasture capacity right now to have more livestock, especially on cattle, and so that's something we're definitely working towards and working there. But yeah, it's like you said a couple times, it's something doesn't happen overnight. It takes a few years. So
I should say that I've been farming organically for so long that it's hard for me to think about conventional, but I grew up with conventional and farmed conventional till I was 33 years old. So, and these principles are the same whether you're conventional or organic farming. It doesn't matter. You still need to reduce your input costs. I don't know, if you have to start buying machinery, if you'd have to or something.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of organic, with its premiums is, you don't need the big acres. So you can use 4-row equipment, which, there's a lot of cheap 4-row equipment out there still.
Mm-hmm. And
if you want to take advantage of it, or if you have to.
Mm-hmm. Well, great.
Like if your dad, if your dad says, well, you got to start buying into the machinery,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I appreciate all your insights, Ron. Luke, we've got a few minutes left here. If we want to open it up to some questions from those who have been listening throughout the session, Luke.
Definitely people are welcome to put questions in, but I still feel like we could spend the last 5 minutes on this slide. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we can do that too. That's just fine. I didn't want to count anybody out there over in the chat box. And one of the other things. Yeah, one of the other things, that we talk into, and you hit on it with the machinery a little bit too, but how do you balance your labor needs with technology and equipment? On the livestock side, it gets pretty labor intensive pretty fast.
Yes.
As you start adding livestock, and Drew mentioned it again too, but we're looking at a situation where we're kind of short on the labor end, and that's a hard thing to manage too. So
yes, but I would think as easy as conventional farming is, at least in my mind, compared to what we do, you probably have some time to keep working on the livestock.
Yeah, we still have some time too. We're not at the edge by any means, but looking forward as you look at planning ahead
right.
For the future, that's something that we always want to consider. You see the decline in rural communities, and Drew mentioned it again too in his question with where do you find some labor to help with some of these things. So
this is why you have kids, Nate. This is why you want. I mean that seriously. Not it sounds funny, but when I look at our children and how they grew up, and other farm kids their age didn't get the opportunities our children did to learn how to work with animals, or how to cultivate, or how to rotary hoe, or how to do anything, because so many of the farms today don't have livestock, and the equipment's too big or too costly or too complicated for the kids to run it. So our kids were there right with us, and and I want to see more women be farmers. You don't have to have boys. I want to see more women get out there and be farmers. I'm a strong proponent of that. And
I'll speak up for my wife on this one. She's a very good combine driver, and was pretty good driving the baler too. So I mentioned to Drew that if he's looking for somebody to drive the tractor when he wants to bale, maybe they could work out an agreement or negotiation. So
my wife did a lot of raking, and has done a lot of runs the baler, and unloading of corn, and she worked off the farm until our kids were till the kids came along, and then for about 15 years she did not work off the farm, and then she started working off the farm with a part-time job. And now, with the store, well, now it's going to be full-time on the farm, full-time off-farm, on-farm job is what you'd call it. But I just think, one thing that caught my attention, Nate, was in your goals, that you had there, wonderful goals. And another goal that I would add for myself would be to be a part of a community. And that's something we got to work hard at, because what's our communities going to look like, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Hopefully there'll be more people like you that are out there farming and raising a family and doing it in a much better way, you know, where you can be neighbors and not worry about farming your neighbor's ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
You're not worried about competing with your neighbor. You're thinking about, well, how can I help my neighbor? How can we help one another? You know, it used to be, you know, we'd visit across the fence in the springtime when I first started farming. Now I never see anybody even farming in the distance. It gets a little lonely out there.
Well, thanks,
Well,
thanks, Ron. I appreciate all your answers and the discussion tonight.
Well, thank you so much for what you're doing, because you're the next generation, you know, and you're getting a leg up on our generation, you know. You really are. I think I'm looking forward to the day when there's literally thousands of farmers like you again, Nate.
Thank you very much for that, and I'm looking forward to that too. It's a little lonely out here in rural Iowa for some young folks. So
it is.
Drew's about the closest one, and he's 15, 20 miles away. So
I hear you.
We could fill. I'd be glad to fill that in.
Well, I think that's our mission right there. And it may not be in my lifetime, but I bet it will be in yours.
Yeah, I wanted just to say that we are concluding for the night, but this is also the end of our Winter Farminar series, and it's been really fun. We've had about 25% increase in live views over last year, and we're going to bring these back again next year. We're looking forward to expanding these, more topics and more information. But the key to that is people like Ron and Nathan who take their time and give their time to this, and we're really glad that they do. And I wanted just to speak up on behalf of 550 Iowa beginning farmers, Ron Rosmann. We are standing on your shoulders, and we are very grateful for the last 30 years you've been working at this.
Oh, thank you. It's been my pleasure, and it's been an honor.
Good night, everyone.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Thanks, Luke.